Chase from Birmingham, he said, who are two teams that could be first-time playoff teams this year? We had a bunch last year that you could see coming, like Penn State and Tennessee, but also some that were from left field, SMU, Indiana. So Chase asks a good question here, but think about what he just said, because a third of the playoff field last year was made up of first-time playoff teams. Now, of course, when you expand the playoff, you're going to have more teams. Therefore, you've got a higher likelihood that someone makes it who has never made it before. Okay, but each year that we get further into the playoff era, whether it's 4 teams or 12 teams, we lose potential candidates to make it for the first time because more teams have made it. That makes sense. Ole Miss is the team I would go with. If you tell me 2 teams are going to make the playoff this fall that have never made it before, but you just don't tell me who they are and I have to guess, Ole Miss is one of them. So I know about the buzz around Austin Simmons at quarterback. So in this world, we're going best case scenario. So he pans out. They fell flat last year in that Kentucky game. And in the best of worlds in 2025, that means that they got shoulders more tense than a prison inmate, and they're constantly on guard, and they don't let it down. And they don't have that inexplicable loss to where they're having to defend themselves, and Lane Kiffin's having to tweet at the playoff committee in December. You don't have that if you take care of business this year. And take care of business, I think they will, because that schedule sets up again. We've got it rated right now as the 3rd easiest schedule in the SEC. Now, that's relative, because to have the 3rd easiest schedule in the SEC still means you play LSU and you go to Georgia and Oklahoma in back-to-back weeks. You do still play South Carolina. You still play Florida. But, again, relatively speaking, that's the 3rd easiest. And I always struggle with how to twist my finger. You see that game right there? If you're listening on a podcast, I'm disrespectfully pointing towards the Kentucky game. I have learned a hard lesson, and that is not to chalk up a win for Ole Miss against Kentucky. But in this scenario, I am. So I'll go Ole Miss. What about Miami? Miami's never made the playoff, right? So if you tell me 2 teams are going to make it to the playoff this year who have never made it before, well, they've trended up 3 consecutive years. Now Cam Ward's leaving. So maybe this is the year where they trend back down, but maybe not. Maybe Carson Beck is fully healthy. And again, if you're talking about making the playoff, the whole basement worst case fear, that's out of it. If they're a playoff team, then theoretically that means Carson Beck played a really good year. And, Carson Beck walks into a situation where he gets paired with Shannon Dawson, a guy who should have been a Broyles Award finalist, in my opinion, this past year. They made a good move at defensive coordinator, I think. Whether it pays dividends in year 1 remains to be seen. But if we're going best case scenario, I guess it did. Schedule is not easy for Miami. This is why they needed to take advantage of last year. They got Notre Dame, they got Florida, they go to FSU, they got Louisville, at SMU, at Virginia Tech and Pitt, back-to-back to end the year. They got to go north 2 times to end the year. But, hey, we're short on candidates here. So I'd go Miami as a candidate. I think Texas A&M's a candidate. They're 6th in returning production this year. And the areas where they lost a lot of guys, like defensive line, wide receiver, they did a good job with the portal, strategically backfilling those positions. It's almost like they know what they're doing. Mike Elko, year 2, okay? That always means something, so I just throw it out there. That's classic Preview Magazine stuff. Hey, quick timeout. Check and see if you're subscribed to the channel. If you're not, make sure you do. It's free. It doesn't obligate you or sign you up for anything. It just helps us keep the channel free. All right, back to the show. If you need filler, if you're short on bullet points, just say, hey, head coach year 2. You just assume that everyone knows that means something significant. It's like returning starters. You just hope everyone thinks it means something significant. Now, they're middle of the pack in the SEC in strength of schedule. They play 7 teams that we have internally rated as Tier 1 or Tier 2. The Tier 2 teams, though, there's a lot of variance there. So, like Auburn could be really good or really bad. Florida, Missouri, South Carolina, they play all 4 of them. And all 4 of them could flirt with double-digit wins or struggle to make a bowl game, and neither would surprise you. It would surprise me if Missouri didn't make a bowl game, but the other ones have real tough schedules. So at A&M, I'd put in there. Louisville's also another team that I would think if we have 2 new playoff appearances this year, maybe Louisville's one of them. They have a really backloaded schedule. You know, I think extremely highly of Jeff Brom. They got a backloaded schedule. They went and got Miller Moss at quarterback out of the portal, and they've done a really good job. Like, they have been what Florida State's tried to be. They've hit in the portal every year without the big dip year. Granted, we're early on in this tenure, but still, they've done it. Isaac Brown, best running back in the country, most of you don't know. And also, if they can replace their defensive losses, I know it's before spring even, but if they can do that, that's one of the best value plays in college football. So if you're telling me we got 2 new playoff teams, I would say it comes from the group of Ole Miss, Miami, Texas A&M, and Louisville. And if it doesn't, whomst is it? Whomst is it?